Hey, I'm Jennifer Santinas. It's nice to meet you virtually if I've not met you before in person, or if you're new here. We're going to be talking about mockups today, so if that's something that you're interested in, stick around. If you're here in the comments, just pop in and say, hey. If you're watching the replay later today or whenever, just if you'll type a comment in and say replay. And I usually tell people at the beginning of these, if you've got any questions about something, I'm happy to go back through when I'm done. If I can see your comment come through while you're asking it, I'm happy to answer it live as well. But other than that, I just want to be really efficient with your time and with mine too, because kids only stay quiet for a little while, right? And actually one of them we had, my husband just took my son. So again, if it's first time here, my name is Jennifer Santinas, and today we're going to talk about mockups. So I'd like to pose a question. I guess I did this with the last one, and just start out with that. So one thing, if you're doing something, so mockups aside for a second, if you're doing something for the first time, the second time, the third time, the fifth time, the 100th time, when do you get better, right? So it's a rhetorical question, of course. You get better the second time and the third time and the 100th time, and you get better and better at the more that you do something. So I'll tie this back into mockups in just a second. But the biggest thing one of the biggest things as a website designer when it comes to doing the same thing over and over again is that clearly if you have done a good job, your client is not going to necessarily be coming back to you, at least immediately. Now maybe for maintenance or little updates and things like that, but you're not going to completely redesign and go through all the strategy and all the pieces of a website process again, like very soon afterwards. So you're really only building that site one time. Now, some website designers build themes and templates and all of that, but that's not what we're talking about. So if you, like, how else do you do that? Okay. So I may use this example again during the live today, but we actually build furniture as a hobby. I've done that as a side business before too. And just right now we're in a rental, so tools are in storage, whatever. But I would always draw up the piece that we were building ahead of time in something called SketchUp, but basically it was a mock-up, right, of a piece of furniture. And so we're also building a house. Clearly they have plans and mock-ups and renderings and things. So this is done in multiple industries, okay? It's not just something new to website design. And probably if you've been around any of this, the term mock-up may be a different term to you, but you've encountered this in some form or another, right? They have the you're fitting before the final dress fitting, or just all kinds of things. So why do we do that, right? It's a time saver. Hopefully we do it to avoid a lot of errors and to kind of in the case I'm going to talk about today, even like stretch our creativity, kind of see what's possible before we get into the actual building. But one of the biggest confidence boosters for me when we build furniture is that I get there into the actual workshop with real wood that right now especially costs a ton of money, or it's wood we've been saving or whatever, and we're able to, it feels like we're building it for the second time, okay? And so that's where that's going to come back around, is that the second or third time you build something, you just get better and better at it. And so when you can come into a project, back into website design, when you can come into a client project and it kind of feels like you've already built it before, this can be a huge relief to you. It's also going to make you way more confident and just better at what you're doing for your clients. And so that's kind of my intro to mockups. That's how I like to think of them. Again, I like to think of them in other industries and kind of see how they relate. So today we're going to talk about what are mockups, like how do you make a mockup, and then some ways that it's going to save you a lot of time, because something I've heard from designers before is that they feel like it would be a time suck, or something that's going to cost them more time or more effort or more headache. And instead I want to flip that completely on its head and be here to challenge you on that is not the case. So again, if you're here with me live, say hi. If you're in the replay, say replay. And I want to make sure that you don't forget about next Tuesday, I'm hosting a free live masterclass. Mockups definitely are on the docket as far as things I'm going to talk about. That's, like I said, and you'll hear again in a second, that's a huge part of my process. And so at the masterclass, we're going through my entire process from step A to Z. I'm also going to talk about some mistakes that designers make. I did a live video on a few of those the other day, and I'll expand on those even more at the masterclass. So it's completely free. It'll be about an hour. I promise it'll be worth your time. There'll be a replay if you can't do it, so sign up either way. But that's at sitemakerstudio.com/class, or there's a link in this video as well. So don't forget to sign up for that. It's just your first name and email. I don't need like your blood type or anything to get registered for that class, okay? So today, mockups. What are mockups. So first of all, that's something I would tell my clients is like, don't use jargon and don't use industry terms, whatever. So let me make sure I'm upfront and clear on what they even are. I consider a mockup, and I'm sure there's clearly more formal definitions of it, but I consider a mockup a realistic picture version of what your client site is going to look like, okay? So you may have also heard the term wireframes or prototypes, and I'll talk about those in just a second. But basically, a mockup is a realistic representation of what a client site is going to look like, okay? So a wireframe, how this is different from a wireframe. A wireframe, I don't typically use the word prototype, but some people do. I talk about with my students and stuff, I talk about sitemaps, wireframes, and mockups. And so a sitemap would be more like outlining what pages you need and where they're going to go and what page might link to what page and things like that. There's also sitemaps for Google to crawl and all that. And then wireframes are typically going to be grayscale, somewhat sketched by hand. So actually, I found one that I was working on before. Let me show you this. So that would be an example of like a really super rough wireframe. So a lot of times after I do something like this, I will go into the computer and make this more grayscale, where like this may have a whole background and may have like some filler, may not even have filler text, just maybe like a block to represent text, or these images here. It's backwards. These images here. So this would be like a sketch of a wireframe. A mock-up is going to take that to level 1000. So by the time you're done with a mock-up and you and the client have went back and forth, a mock-up should be almost indistinguishable from the real website. And again, at that masterclass, I am going to show you some examples. I've got multiple slides of examples of where I have the last mock-up that me and the client decided on, and then like that same page on their website. And some of them you almost can't tell a difference at all. And so I think that a lot of times designers miss a good opportunity there to take away some of the stress and some of the tension and some of the just rough, like hard conversations to have sometimes, like when you're trying to explain something a certain way and a client's trying to understand it or explain it a certain way, and if you kind of feel like you can't get it out in words, a mock-up is going to be an amazing resource to do alongside your process so that you're able to communicate more of what the design's going to look like. So a mock-up should look exactly like the real website. The only caveat to that is minus the interactions and some of the button clicks and things like that. So there are programs. I use Figma. I also use Adobe XD. You could do a mock-up in Illustrator. I've had previous instructors and other friends that do them in Illustrator, in Photoshop. I haven't tried doing one in Canva. I'm sure you could. Any other type of design software like that. It's just like what you're comfortable in. You can get them more realistic looking in something that's made for mocking up websites, like a prototyping or wireframing tool like Figma or XD. So if you're wanting like super detailed like I'm describing, those are going to be a better choice. But if you're familiar with Photoshop, or if you want to give it a whack at Canva, that's totally cool. Use those. One of the biggest things though is just that it's an opportunity and a chance for you to explore creative options with a client that you might not be able to do if you go directly into the website building platform. Okay, so if you go straight into, and I've heard this argument before too, like, well, because I use a drag and drop builder like Squarespace or Wix, or if you use a plugin like Elementor is my favorite plugin for WordPress, things like that. If you use those, because they can drag and drop everything on the screen, right? That they would argue, well, why do I need anything more than this? I can just come in and drag these little pieces. The thing with that I find, and I'll touch on it more here in just a second, is I just feel like your creativity gets really limited. And so I mentioned a previous instructor a second ago. When I was very early on doing websites, I actually took a mock-up workshop from, now she's a good friend, but at the time just an instructor. And she really showed that process of taking a mock-up, and then by the end of the day, we had an entire working website. And it was really neat to see how those things, how you pulled things over. And then in further classes and masterminds and things like that I took with that same instructor, one of the things she challenged us to do was basically just be as creative as we wanted to be, instead of thinking like so narrow-minded in whatever platform you're using. So part of the reason I love Webflow is that it doesn't have any of those design limitations. But if you've got that mindset right now where, well, I'm already going to be building it in Squarespace, so why don't I just go ahead and start building it in Squarespace? I think you'll be able to come up with even better ideas, and your creativity will kind of be unleashed a little more if you do a mock-up first. Okay, so I want to make sure that I've got some notes. I want to make sure that was all of my notes of those. Yeah, the last thing, the interactions. So I just don't do, I might do like the homepage will click over to the about page, but when I'm presenting it to a client, I just tell them like, you know, here you can kind of scroll through this mock-up and see what it looks like. And you'll kind of gauge also with your clients over time, like some of them, a mock-up, even though it almost functions exactly like a real website, it still may throw them off, and that's okay. You can work with them to find a better way to communicate it. But sometimes the interactions and things, like if something's going to move on the screen, like a parallax effect or something, that's kind of hard to translate in a mock-up. But other than that, your mock-up should look almost identical to the actual site, and it'll help take care of a lot of communication. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to actually make mockups. So I'm not going to turn, Facebook won't even let me share my screen, but I'm not going to turn this into like a whole how-to video. There's tons of amazing resources for like the ones I mentioned. Figma and XD are my favorite. Browse YouTube, find all of those, or ask me for one and I'll do one. But basically the first thing I'm going to do when I'm going to start building a mockup, and this is what I would encourage you to do, is to start with this, right? So I keep referring to this. I found another one. This one's a little lighter in pencil. It's kind of hard to see. But start with something like that. Start with a sketch, start with a wireframe. You need to know the content that you're going to need on the page. If you just start doing this and then tell your client that they need 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, it's going to be a horrible website. So please don't do that. In Design and Grow Webflow, which is the program that I coach and teach right now, I go over how to use Figma and XD as far as like making a mock-up. But a couple things that you can do with or without that is laying out a design system inside your mockup program. So I'm going to keep saying Figma since that's what I use. So inside Figma, laying out a design system where you have already at your fingertips the colors that you're going to use for the website. So the video we did the other day talked about that. You can go see that if you need to. We talked about gathering photos, images, and then content. So you need to have all of those things before you go in to do the mockup. So that video is really helpful. Hopefully that will kind of lend a hand to what you're collecting for the client. But go ahead and have those things ready to go when you're doing the mockup. And then secondly, having the ability to quickly move pieces around and playing with different elements. That's another huge thing that is very easy to do inside of something like Figma or XD, that may be a little harder depending on your website platform, or just to take you more time to do it. One of the encouragements I have here, encouragement slash have to be a little honest here, you can't get lazy on these, okay? For a lot of times I have just offered the homepage mockup, but I still do the other pages. Sometimes I'll show them to the client or not. And now I pretty much do them for every page, and the client and I will walk through all of them. But you can't get lazy on these. So this is not the sexy work. This is not like the super, super glamorous. I mean, you can post, I guess if you want to be fancy and post like pictures of an Instagram or whatever, that's fine, but this is not the like super glamorous work of building a website, okay? But it is going to be the piece that really helps, kind of one of the first jumping off points that's going to help your client get that really sexy result that they're wanting, okay? So y'all are going to be able to have a much better conversation around the design of the website, how the content's fitting. Again, I know I keep bringing up, but I'm happy to bring up the masterclass next week. I have an example of a client that just had way too much content, like way too much. And when we were actually at more of a wireframe stage, I was able to show the client, like, look how long, and as soon as they saw it, they're like, that's way too long. Like, I didn't realize I gave you that much stuff. And so we were able to shrink that down dramatically. And had I have an easy drag and drop builder, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. If I had done all that work inside the website platform, I would probably still be in tears today. So building a mockup, it's just how we're going to ensure that when we go to build the actual website inside, again, I love Webflow, inside WordPress, inside Squarespace, whatever you're using, that you and the client are able to agree ahead of time. And in essence, when you get ready to build it, you've kind of already built it, right? Like I mentioned with the furniture stuff. So you get in there into the website platform and you're way less intimidated. One thing here I didn't have in my notes, but I explain this to clients a lot of times, really even early on, is I explain the difference in like right brain and left brain activities, and why I have certain boundaries and deadlines throughout my entire process, which we'll talk about more in depth next Tuesday. But when I'm having to switch back and forth between like gathering content, designing, do you need more picture content? Like that back and forth is really taxing for me personally. I also try to limit the number of hours that I work, right? We're homeschooling, have kids, everybody has family, everybody's home like all the time now. And so if something that can streamline your process a whole lot would be to stay kind of in that one mindset. And so to wrap up that thought, when I'm designing in the actual website platform, so when I'm in Webflow, I don't want to be going back and deciding like, well, did we want a slider there or not? Or was that, paragraph going to be 3 sentences or 8? They gave me 8, maybe these. Like, I don't want to be making those design decisions then. I want to have set aside creative, blocked off time to do the mock-ups. Us have had multiple conversations about it, done revisions, all that stuff. And then when I go to actually build the site, I mean, it's not copy and paste in the sense that you can't copy and paste it from the design, but it's literally just me looking like I'm doing right now, looking at one screen and looking at another screen. And I'm just, okay, that's next, build this. That's next, build this. And if you're a designer that hands things off to a developer, even better, you make the mock-up and then you hand it to the developer and you're not even building the rest of the site. Okay, so to recap those things, how to make a mock-up, start with wireframes, then build it out in something like Figma. Figma's free also, which I really like, and that's actually the reason that I started using it is instead of Adobe XD. That way when I teach it to other people, they can use the free version as well. And so then we talked about what mockups are, their realistic expectations of what the site is going to look like. The last part of this is how mockups are going to save you time. So to be honest, it physically makes me kind of sick feeling to think of the few times that I have skipped this in a process. And it wasn't necessarily that I was like doing it wrong. I just didn't. There were times I didn't know how to do them, and then there were times that I thought that it would be a shortcut or a better way to do it, like that I didn't need to do them. And now when I think back on that, those designs are like not as well designed. They may not have met the goals the same way that I would have hoped or been as hopeful for at the beginning of a project. And I think just the idea of losing that piece of the process just makes me sad. So I learned how to do them really early on, so that only covers a few client sites that I can think of, and then a few maybe like I did something for a friend. So you think, or sometimes your own site, you think like, I'll just skip this part because this is different clients, but maybe this is for myself. It always bites me in the butt, and it always comes back, and it makes me really sad to think of the times that I skipped doing it. I just didn't realize how much time it would save me. So another thing with how mockups can save you time is if a client doesn't like an idea, that's one thing. If they come back and tell you they don't like something or you need to change something and you built that already, that is a major pain. Then at that point, that's a complete waste of time. Like, you do not get that time back, depending on how you bill or charge, whatever. Like, you may or may not be able to charge them again for doing that. And so I just feel like if a mock-up gives you kind of gives you both that leeway, right, to make those corrections and to be able to make those decisions before too much time is lost, and definitely before any kind of like development or actually building the site would take place. So my biggest tip here for how to actually like go about doing the mockups is that when you get to working with a client and you're showing them a mockup, do anything in your power that you can to show them a mock-up over a video. So whether you do it, some people might get nervous to do it in a live format like this. So you could do it pre-recorded. A lot of times I'll use Loom for pre-recording a video for a client, and sometimes it's just a scheduling thing, like I'll do them at 5 in the morning or something. So I'll present it over video. But again, if you use something like Figma or XD, you're able to generate a scrolling version of that site. And so they can truly open that up. What would be, if you did it in Photoshop or Illustrator, it might just be a stagnant image, and that still gets the point across, but it's really cool to be able to see that scrolling image and to be able to see like how their site would actually flow. And again, like I mentioned, the one client, they may come back and be like, I didn't realize this is how the content was going to flow, or we need to move this section here, or you may advise them after you've looked at it, like, this does not fit here, and I know you gave me this paragraph to go here, that needs to go to a completely separate page. Like, you're able to make those decisions with almost no strings attached, without everybody being emotional, and without you thinking in the back of your head like, I can't believe they hate that slider that took me 3 hours to find the right solution for it or whatever. So it takes away so much of that. And then I use a program, not really program, I guess, it's an app, a website called markup.io, 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 and there's plenty of other ones similar to it, but it basically allows you to load the website, and you and the client can go in. It's kind of like Google Docs for like a picture, and so you can go in and pinpoint specifically places on the site that they want to change things. And so I use that a lot of times. XD and things have different commenting features. They all have different stuff like this, but I've used Markup with clients and they really love it. And we're able to say, like, I think this part here needs to change to here, this part here, like, change this color or whatever. And I just feel like it gives such a better conversation back and forth, instead of when I didn't do it like that and I didn't collect feedback like that. They would send me something being like they'd call things different. Like I call something the header and they may call like the navigation something else, or I don't know. We just would get mixed up on a lot of things because there wasn't like a clear actual representation in front of us. So if you're able to do that, definitely do that with Markup or anything like that. So to wrap that up, Mockups, hopefully this has been helpful. If you have any questions about it, feel free to drop those in the comments, and like I said, I'll swing back around afterwards and answer that, or you can send me a message and ask me as well. If you can't tell, hopefully it's come across today, I'm pretty passionate about this being a part of the process, and I really just think it's something that designers need to not skip. If that means you need to up your fees or whatever it is to make it fit in, change your process, like as far as timeline, it does add some extra time, I think, to the design and build portion, but it takes a lot of time out of the build portion. So if I can put more time into the design part, I'm a happy camper. And honestly, clients don't usually care like kind of which end it's in. It's just made a huge difference in my process over the years. And so I will talk about this even more in the masterclass. So don't forget sitemakerstudio.com/class, or you can get the link in this video, and it's completely free to register. We'll chat for about an hour. I will, you know how those work, hopefully, like I'll introduce my program at the end of it, but there's no pressure on that. I'm happy to still, you know, that's why I do things like this. So you can watch the videos, learn as much as you can from it, and then if that's something that you want to dive into or learn more about, then feel free to do that at the masterclass, but that's called the Designer's Method. So hopefully I'll see you there. Mock-up questions, leave them here. Find these other videos I've done the past few days over collecting content from clients, and then on next week on Monday, I'm going to do one more Facebook Live. You've heard me mention it a few times. I'm using Webflow for clients and for the course coming up as well. And so we're going to actually chat about Webflow. We're going to talk about why it's what I've leaned into now, why it's different. Will it work for your client? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Come and find out. I really hope to see you at the masterclass. I hope to see you next Monday at the next Facebook Live. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your week and an amazing weekend.